5 interviews, conversations with creative, expressive jugglers that I'm particularly excited to talk to share, um, yeah, a little bit about how they see juggling, how they interact with it, what it means to them, and it's just going to give us all a lot more context and hopefully inspire everybody to really find themselves with juggling. So today we have Teton Juggler, Joe, with us, and we're going to get him on stage right away. So
Up, guys?
hello, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Anthony, for having me, man. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, so we let's relax into this a second, right? Because there's a lot to there's so much to talk about here. Um, I've been juggling myself for around 30 years, um, and I've not really ever seen anybody do quite like what you're up to, Joe. So it's very interesting, um, um, just how you like what inspires you and what keeps you in this creative, expressive state, um, and yeah, just it's how you see juggling and all of this. And let's just start. Let's just start somewhere very simple, okay? Perhaps just start sharing a little bit about your story. Let's do that.
All right, yeah. Well, to start out with just the name Teton Juggler, Teton refers to the Teton mountain range, which is the mountain range in bordering Wyoming and Idaho here in the United States. And I live on the Idaho side. And I've been living here for about 5 years. But before settling down in this area, I was traveling for numerous years with my girlfriend, living out of a van, kind of just exploring the whole West Coast, west side of the United States, living very spontaneously and to the moment. And before that, I lived in Alaska, and I lived there until I was about 23, in the biggest city in Alaska called Anchorage.
Oh, wow.
So
So what? Let's just go into because you do you're skiing when you're juggling, you're slacklining when you're juggling, and like you do all this crazy shit with axes as well, and on your skates as well, and on your bicycle, and there's just so many different fields up there. Um, well, one thing like this is always like a stupid question, but it's like the lead with it. How do you find your time for practice?
well, since leaving Alaska, when I was in Alaska, I was a carpenter, and I was a carpenter in the union. I had went through like 4 years of schooling, and so I was dedicated to that career. But when I made the decision to move into a van and leave, I kind of left that mindset of work, which I had been in since I was like 17. And since leaving there, I haven't really had a structured job that has taken me 9 to 5 and taken up a lot of my time. There was a summer or two there I worked as a farmer, but primarily I've been traveling and living very frugally and just putting everything into kind of my skills and my practice. And now that I've been juggling, I've been making just enough money to kind of just keep myself floating and going. And so
Yeah,
I find time by allocating a lot of time to it. I think that I would definitely never be able to put in the amount of time and practice I am now if I was uh, juggling a job like a career job as well.
yes, yeah, yeah. And of course, it was like a bit of a trick question to get you to get you to come about that. Allocating time to it is just diving fully into it. And
Oh yeah.
lots of us jugglers, we know this feeling of not having a 9 to 5, having time to practice, and just as you said, my practice. There's so much passion. Just is just like coming out of this word practice. I think it's something definitely be interesting to hear you dive a little bit more into this into what is practice. What is practice, Joe?
Practice for me, oh man, it's a hard thing to describe. I don't even see it necessarily like as practice, like I'm going to go and just repetitively do this a similar moves to get better at something, even though that's what might be occurring. Uh, it's more like a discipline or similar to like a mixed martial art is how it seems to be perceived by myself nowadays, where it's like my space and my time to really explore that intimate side of myself and what it's saying at whatever time of the year and whatever time of the day. So practice to me is yeah, it's like it's a discipline. And it's definitely grown over the last 5 to 6 years that I've been on this journey away from Alaska and kind of discovering myself. I would say that it grew very naturally into something, but was really inspired by going out into the woods and really trying to find out what this creative flow state was to me. And when I say going out in the woods, I had mentioned that I was traveling in a van kind of open-endedly for a few years there. And we ended up doing this program called woofing, where you work on farms with local farmers that are looking for hands, and they'll normally allow you to stay on their land for a certain amount of hours that you put in each day. And we ended up in a space in California, a very special space to me, a very spiritual space that we were off grid and we were away from society deep in the mountains. And that's where this word practice, that's where this thing that I now do every day really was birthed. Because at this moment in my life, as I can discuss further, at this moment in my life, I was very focused on what this flow state was to me. And when I say flow state, I mean this state that I had found in extreme sports primarily. I had been doing skiing and mountain biking and rollerblading and even ice skating. Most of the things I do today, I had done in Alaska growing up most of my youth and into my 20s. And in my 20s, I had pushed these sports into such a space where I had witnessed a certain level of creative flow come out of me in these moments where it was very high stakes. And that really put me on a journey, having these moments occur quite a few times. It put me on a journey of saying, what is this space? What is this creative space to me? And I bring this up because that's why that's where I was in my mind when I went out into, sorry, here, I'm having trouble. That's where I was in my mind when I went out into the woods. Um, was I was wondering what this creative, powerful space was, and I was ready to dive into myself to explore it, kind of like myself as the experiment. And through that process, which led me to the slackline and then into juggling, that's when I developed what we're referring to when we use the word practice.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. The flow state is the flow state is this state where it's what educators they call the zone of proximal development, where we are. It's not too difficult. It's not too easy. So it's just finding that sweet spot that
Oh,
activates us into. So that's so. How has your practice evolved? Um, and you mentioned you do. It's like you just how is your let's just dive in, stay a little bit more of the practice a little bit, because um, some people zap all up over the place. How long do you stay with something? Do you stay with something until you sort of like nail it, or like you stay until you sort of like feel it gets a little bit better, or like after a while you say, look, today's not the day for this and move on to something else? Or how much time do you spend on any one thing before you move on to the next? And
I wouldn't say that I value how to stay on one thing or another necessarily off of like because it depends on why you're doing the thing, right? If I'm doing a set of movements because I want to get better at like walking a high line while juggling, then I would just kind of daily practice the juggle while walking on the line. But if I wanted to do a big move for Instagram, then I might probably just focus on that move for an extended period of time over a few days and just grind for it. But really, what I'm trying to say is it's kind of how I see what I'm doing would determine kind of how to answer that question. And this kind of gets at what this is all about for me, which is really a pursuit of that state that we're saying when we say the flow state. I mean, that word flow state, it means so many things nowadays because of how society has used it and marketed it and all these things. But that flow state, to me, it's a state where you can get into that raw state of becoming or that raw state of play, which I've heard you talk about before, Anthony. And um, that to me is what's primarily the goal of my practice is to get into a state where that way of being kind of takes over and I find myself almost in a trance of sorts, um, in that state, and I crave it. My whole practice depends upon it because in it I find all my inspiration and I find a level of control that I never experience in any other states of juggling or any action sports. um, so to me, that's what kind of frames how long I'll stay with something or not. It's really all determining on where is that state of play in me and how do I get in it and how do I stay in it. And if at that time doing a certain trick has me there and has my story gripped there, I'll stick with that.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so cool. It's it's lots of jugglers that say maybe you will experience this sort of state at the very beginning or the first couple of years, and then it dwindles, and then people will lose it, right? And you seem to be fully cultivating it, and I really appreciate this. What you're bringing to this conversation about the importance of looking for what is fun to you, looking what is like fun being in the flow state, right? Looking what lights you up, looking what's and and it seems to me that the act of actually physically being with your body as well adds to this. It's not just you and the props, right? It's you and the props together.
Totally, man. Oh man, I could go off on this for hours because ultimately I feel like what you mean by people experiencing it maybe more at the start and having it be harder and harder to attain is that thing I was I feel like so much of it has to do with narrative and it has to do with story and really that underlying story of why you're juggling, and understanding what that is to you and those images that come with that and how to really hold on to those images. I think that's a very hard journey, that really relies upon the story that you're working with. Like I think that part of juggling and surviving in society has to do with following certain narratives or ways of seeing your juggling that could maybe pull one from the playfulness of that story and the root of that story. It's very easy for society to pull you away from it, in my perspective. And so I think maintaining the story over the course of years in your practice is actually one of the harder elements of the practice. And it's where most of my focus is, not just experientially by going out and doing it, but also I do a lot of study. I read a lot of philosophy and psychology, and I find myself in certain directions in those fields that I resonate with, that align with this kind of whole picture view and help ground me in that story. It's like I'm trying to stay in the story and I'm trying to come into society and balance there, and that balance seems to be impossible, but I see people make it work. But it's a hard balance, man. I mean, I slackline, so I balance every day, and let me tell you what, that balance between the story and what we need to do in society to survive, keeping that alive and balanced, I don't know how to do it, man. It's crazy hard.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you just mean like being recognized financially or like being accepted, or what is actually mean by what do you mean by the challenge there?
Probably just financial stability. Like, what do you end up doing where your daily habits and what you're doing every day, are they helping support your attention to be focused on that story and that raw state, or are they pulling you more into a kind of systematic kind of like repetitiveness that we all have to do to kind of like survive in society if we want to make that paycheck or make the money? Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes total sense. So what do you see is like do you see like the worry I have to make money from this as being something that takes you completely out of flow state, or what other things that would potentially pull you out of a flow state? Would you say?
It's a hard question. I think it's just maybe where part of where I live, but I think in part what I'm saying is when I invest into society and I start to make money off my practice and put it into performance and put it into shows and interact with people, I create images that seem to pull me away from the images that really drew me into the juggle and drew me into the balance and
Okay, I got you. I got you.
the play.
I got you.
And it happens on a habitual level where it's like every day when you wake up, what are you doing to structure your day? What are you doing in that day? That's what I see kind of underlyingly shaping attention and shaping kind of how we're perceiving the world. And so if you're having to do those habitual ways, it kind of can pull you, I think, from the attention that could be really focusing on the bigger picture and and that whole play experience, the flow. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Um,
And I'm not saying it's
yeah,
bad. I'm saying that
no,
there's a
no.
balance, and I just am trying at this stage. I'm trying to figure out what that balance is, and it's hard.
I'm a fan of Alan Watts. Lots. I'm a big fan of lots of different things, right? But Alan Watts, he talks about this thing about money. He says if you do something long enough, you become a master. You know, and then when you've got mastery, then money comes. You know, I don't want to be ingenious about this thing or naive. Um, I've been Joe. The last 5 years, I've been studying marketing, ethical marketing, which means not going for the sale or not being salesy. You know, trying to come across as you are, but it's really challenging. It's really challenging, but it's in the end, it's coming down to what is your message. You know, that's the thing, and you're living a message now, so it's there, and I'm sure there are people that want part of what you're doing, you know. So they want to be part of it, you know. It's like, tell me more about this flow state, you know. It's like people are craving this state. So
Well, I feel in part, I feel like we're craving it more and more because our society is pulling us into these habits that are pulling us away from it. You know, it's just a part of the mechanization of our society. I mean, this is what I really study a lot in the philosophy that I read is I circle around this concept that we have these forms of attention in us and they're they can even be opposing each other and how they go about attending to reality and we're actively daily either supporting one or the other in how we're going about perceiving reality to go about surviving in it. And so I study this stuff because I feel as though or the stuff that I study talks about how we're moving more and more into this form of attention that breaks things down into parts and categorizes and builds up whole pictures from the parts versus maybe perceiving the whole as the whole in itself, which is an ability that we have and that's intimate to us as jugglers because we're working with patterns, we're trying to perceive the patterns as a whole and not get lost in one part of it. And so this mechanization is kind of overriding society and taking over our habitual lives. And I feel as though as a collective, we're feeling more and more of a desire to get back to that whole picture in the way that we, feel about ourselves. Man.
cool. So so you were doing your extreme sports, and then all of a sudden you came across juggling. What happened then when you met juggling? And
Well, the extreme sports brought me to the woods, like I said, and it really had me in a state of wondering what this flow state was to me. In learning more about you, I saw that you were very into yoga and probably the philosophy behind yoga. When I was out there in the woods at the beginning, I was also studying yoga, the book philosophy. What is it? I think It's one by Iyengar, I want to say. He's a Hindu um, yogi that came to America to teach yoga philosophy. I think it's Light on Life is the book that I was deeply studying, which is just a kind of like a philosophy from a yogi. So it said things that, we're not really maybe used to as Westerners in how we experience reality and asana or position and what it was to them. And so I was very intrigued by this. And it's kind of what I was studying as I started to practice slacklining out in these woods that I was talking about.
Mm.
And so essentially, I dove into balance. I wanted to know what flow state was. I ended up diving into balance out in the woods in a very sacred area without a lot of distractions. And I stood on that line balancing for hours and for months at a time. And in that state, I was really listening to the kind of like internal messages, the intuition that I was feeling each day. I was getting very sensitive to it. And I bring all this up because one day I was on the line and that voice was just like, you see those rocks? And I was like, yeah, I'm looking at these rocks and it's like, juggle them. And I'm like, all right. So I just started juggling these three rocks and then I started to try to juggle them on the line because I had known how to juggle a basic cascade from youth. I learned in gym class long ago, but I had never really done anything with it. I could just always do it. But then I started to do it on the line. And in that moment, I just kind of like, I had a moment there with the juggle where I was like, wow, this is something to do with that feedback and that balance and these core principles I'm trying to learn about this flow state. And so that led to me fully incorporating juggling into my practice. And since then, I've just kind of gone with it. So yeah, I see it through that lens kind of what I've heard you speak about with yoga. If you want to elaborate a little on how you see it like that.
How I see juggling.
Yeah, in terms of your yoga background.
Yeah, right. So yeah, so yeah, juggling is essentially what I was particularly interested in is how when is the echo of the echo that comes through the body after we've juggled. You know, it's let's just take five balls for example, a juggle, and I put them down a second, and I just feel how it's activated my body, and I feel a lot of energy like right here. Um, or sometimes when you're very quiet after of having a juggle practice, you really feel your whole body alive and very much awake, um, and your mind is actually when we talk about meditation and yoga, um, you need a basis to concentrate on, right? And so when um, when we're doing asana or whatever it is, we're really listening to how that position changes how I feel, changes how the energy in the body moves, and that becomes the basis of my concentration, which becomes my meditation in the end. So that is that feeling. It's that coming back to feeling rather than doing. As long as I'm just doing juggling, then um, it's a very mental process. But when I start to be it and live it, then it starts to turn around a little bit. And I'm also a big fan of performance training, movement training, let's say acting training, all within a juggling practice. It can all be there. You know, if I when I'm training, I'm using my imagination. I'm visualizing what's going on. I'm feeling how I am. I'm not forcing it. You know, today I feel like this. I train with how I feel. Um, Tomorrow I feel in another way. I'm not trying to just be in a good mood or a certain mood that I think I need to be in to practice. You know, it's once you start warming up into it, you're away, right? Um, so in the end, all these practices, it's about peace. I would say peace, peace, getting this one focused mind going. Yeah. So when I I've been holding retreats, Joe, for a long time now. Since I was 23, actually. Since I was 23, so I'm now 50. It's 27 years, and even the first one, I read this book, The Zen of Juggling, and just inspired me to take my juggling students out in the mountains, and just did whole sorts of different practices all together. All sorts of different. It was very disjointed, but it worked. Now it's much more refined, but it takes folks right into this flow state that you're talking about. Like we totally get there, and it gives it a direction and gives it a clearer expression, because I think that's the next step. Once you're in the flow state, it's understanding how to maintain the flow even when you're stationary, because if you're moving about all the time as a juggler, nobody gets it. You need, like in classical music, where you have pauses, and then that makes the rest of the music even louder. We need this alternation of stuff. I think that's when we take a practice and we start to develop it more as really as like an expression.
Yeah, I mean, all that resonates with me deeply. I really liked what you said about the aliveness in the juggle, and it reminds me of what I was studying out there when I was studying the yoga philosophy of just like that's what asana is all about. It's not just about finding the position, it's about living in that position, about having it be a live position where it's like stability and movement all encapsulated in that moment. And that's where I was in the mind state when this all began, and kind of how I built it. What you're saying about, just going out in nature and kind of doing these retreats, I mean, it speaks to me deeply, because almost all the juggling I do out here in the Tetons is outside. I don't really have a public indoor space that's very easily accessible and um, allows me to practice in indoor settings. So I'm normally always outside. It's how my whole practice started, was in the woods too. So I find it just comfortable for me. I normally take my shoes off and I'm like dirty in the ground, just trying to like, that's why a lot of the times my shirt's off too, is I'm just trying to get into that state of being really raw. And then the structure of how a practice might go is I move around from a lot of different activities. A lot of the times what you were saying about like what you were just saying about yoga, I really resonated with in slackline, because it's so dynamic and you're on a system that's moving and moves to your every thought. It really exemplifies how much thought and movement are interconnected. And so I was very much invested in slackline, in juggling, and in like biking. And so what I started to do was like circuits in the day where I would start out in juggling, juggle for a long time, like hours, and then move into the slackline, get on the slackline for a while until I blended with the line, then bring the juggling in, juggle and do that together. And then I would say, okay, I need some intensity. So I'd either put a new trick on that was really hard, or I would move into like biking. And then I keep ramping up and trying to use my little successes to take on bigger challenges, so that there's a moment in the day where I'm going after something that then maybe I post and you guys see, but really it's an accumulation of a whole morning of building up to this moment where I'm kind of just experimenting and exploring in a very raw and dialed state, the best way to describe it. And that's like a
Yeah,
powerful
yeah,
morning
yeah,
for me. It's hard to get that a lot though. I would say that's not like you were saying before, that used to be a common thing at the beginning. It was really easy to live in that energy and to stack it. And as I've gone and become more structured and more mature in the process, it does take certain days or maybe months with the right moons and everything for everything to line up for me to really get in there and have a session that hits that thing.
yeah. Right, right, right. But you don't. Okay, so you can answer this for yourself as well, but this is for, let's say, jugglers that are feeling a bit discouraged. They might be feeling discouraged because their practice isn't going where they want it to be going, or they don't feel good enough maybe. or perhaps they're feeling discouraged because they're just not enjoying it as much as they used to, or perhaps they're feeling discouraged um, for hundreds of different reasons. What do you say to this discouragement? Like, talk about for yourself as well, but also like your advice for yourself, for other people. What what to say about that?
It goes back to that narrative for me. It goes back to the story of why you're doing what you're doing on that intuitive, really instinctual level. And I feel as though when I get discouraged or lose motivation, it's because something's wrong with that story. How I'm perceiving myself in terms to that story, there's some type of discrepancy going on, some type of expectation or standard that I've put on myself because of maybe the culture, the images that we all support in each other of what is success and what's right. It's created some type of block in me where I'm finding myself pushing away from it to get away from those feelings and that resistance. And so I don't know necessarily how to navigate that. That's like a psychological situation. But what I'm saying is, I always ask myself, where's my story? What am I really doing this for and why? And I ask those questions, and I don't really expect to receive answers in the rational. I kind of just stew on that, and then I do my thing, dude. I dance and I go juggle, and I look for it in what happens out there, if that makes sense. Sometimes I'll have those questions, and I'll be like, man, what is this going on? Like, why do I feel these resistances, or what is this to me? And then I go out into the world, and from my disposition, maybe from my karma, I don't know, man, but I'll have the universe kind of like respond to me. I'll have a day out there ski juggling where I'll interact with hundreds of people and go through all of these meaningful connections, and people will be like, hey man, we love that you're just pushing every day, doing your own thing, and just don't stop. And that will, like, almost like gasoline on the fire of your passion. It'll just kind of, and I'll be like, all right, there's my answer. I think a big part of it is living in a slight unknowing of that story. Like, you know it, but you don't know it. And I think there's times in my life where that unknowing can become overwhelming, and I just don't want to deal with it. And that can be discouraging. And so putting the questions out to the unknown universe, and when it responds a little bit, to me, that's a feedback that keeps me going. So that would be my response, is just question the story and ask for some type of answer in the story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't. Yeah, okay. I get. I get you. So yeah, whenever we have dodgy emotions or emotions that it's like you've built up such like wanting to meet the challenge. This is what comes across to me, that even if you're feeling like uncomfortable emotions, you're actually able to sit with it, and that's what needs to happen for it to transform actually. And if I was to like slightly hint on what could possibly be sort of like juggling therapy, let's say, it's really this. It's working through any resistance or emotions that are coming up for us um, through our art, and then actually transcending it somehow. It's feeling it and letting it go rather than pushing it away all the time. And
It's like a key. It's like a key for me, at least, because it's about that play again. We're hitting that zone of the play where when I hit that play, you can release those emotions and those pent up energies. And
yeah,
yeah, to me, juggling just became a key, a doorway into that play. And I think a part of that was my own, my own fixation with the timing, the rhythm, the precision, the fun, but also how the culture and how juggling and circus and how that's all perceived in our culture, how it allows you to kind of express yourself. It's a doorway into finding more out about yourself, that when you do it in society, it's perceived and accepted in a certain way. So it was a key for me to be like, oh, look, I can do my play, I can dance and do my thing that I kind of have been doing since I was like 3 years old. Like, I can trace the same feelings all the way back to being in my room with like spatulas, Peter Pan, like it's that same underlying freedom of movement and association and imagination. But now here's this outlet, this key for me to kind of express it. And so it's very therapeutic for me. I find that when I'm emotional and angry, that's when my best juggling can come out, when I'm actually pent up on things in the right way where I'm not pent up on things because of my juggling. I'm pent up on life, and the juggling is my avenue to just let it out.
Yeah, yeah, cool. You said something now, and it's gone. I wanted to comment on it, but never mind.
It's all
So
good.
many things, so many things coming out of this conversation. It's amazing. Um, yeah, we've been talking for quite some time. I would talk about this even longer. Um, let's see what there was something else. So we've been talking about lots of different stuff here. So when does it? When do you? I mean, it's saying the same thing from a different angle, right? But when is it that juggling becomes an art?
What do you mean by this question? Do you mean like, when does it physically start to look like an art, or what, can you define it a little more what you mean by that?
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, so yeah, what is art as well, right? What is art?
Yeah.
Um,
We got to be careful here, Anthony. We could dive too deep, bro.
yeah, so um, essentially we talk about this anyway. Art is how I'm seeing it right now. It's a way of expressing yourself essentially. So we just answered our own question basically. It becomes an
Well,
art.
my response to that was going to be like, when did juggling become a sport? Like, when did it change from just being an art? Or when, like, because I don't know like enough about juggling. We go way back, but I do know that like juggling is on the pyramids. It's in the pyramids. So we know that the ancient Egyptians were juggling, and it kind of just goes back to that thing about story again. I feel like there's been many perceptions of what this activity has been to us as humans. And I think the one we're in now, it's very easy to slip into looking at it as sport and valuing it through that lens, which isn't necessarily wrong. It's one lens. It's one way of looking at it, and it's highly competitive, so it can change how you yourself go about feeling it. I feel. So yeah, my answer to that question would just be like, when did it become a sport? And I guess my mind goes to like World War II, but I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But a sport can be an art as well. It's when there's character to it, right? Or when it's not this with let's say with play theory, and I like to take people through their play history, right? And this is what I wanted to say earlier. It's like a lot of my work around play is getting people to reconnect to what they were doing when they were like three, like you were saying. Not so much doing, even not so much as actually doing that, but connecting to the feeling that they had when they were like three or four.
Totally.
And when you reconnect to that, then it's just all going to flow a lot more. So that's what it was for you. For somebody else, maybe they were doing other stuff, when they were three. Of course, they were doing other stuff. So there are eight, nine. I prefer the nine play personalities, and one of them is the competitor. And all of these play personalities, when they're done through a lens of play, the healthier side of it comes up. So there's a lot of healthy competition, right? When we're
Yeah,
competing with friends and we're trying to get everyone's trying to get better, and there's like this camaraderie that comes out of it, right? But when it loses the play element, then it becomes this shadow side of play, which it doesn't have any play in it. It's just like I'm only happy if I'm the best is what comes out,
totally.
and
Totally.
that's like bad place to be in. It's you need to. That's why we need to get the play in there. And this is with all of the play personalities. Um, they all have a shadow side and a healthier, playful side when it's met through play. Like an explorer, right? An explorer when it's playful has a edge to it. When it doesn't have it, then you have these very intense extreme sports players. that you will have met them. There's not so much
Oh,
pain there.
I have one intimately within me. Yeah, he's in there. I deal with them all the time. I mean, I grew up playing hockey and baseball and all the competitive sports, but mainly hockey and baseball. And I was just thinking about it this morning, thinking about our convo and how you discuss play. And I was like, I think what really took me down in hockey in particular because I did it competitively was I lost that play. I just kind of and with the loss of that play because of the atmosphere, I lost my skill. And once you lose your skill, I mean, I had parents and coaches tell me they're like they didn't know how to necessarily go about telling me, but they were like, "Joe, you're just not the player you were." And it was devastating for me, but also it was part of the what you said before. It was part of that underground emotional situation that I think led to such an extreme reaction that said, "Hey, I'm going to go into the woods and I'm going to play. I'm not going to put any. I'm not going to care if I'm naked. I got naked on that line. I yelled. I screamed. I kind of did a. I had my own episode out there in the woods, and I think you have to kind of do that. What you were saying just a second ago about kind of how there's shadow sides to these things. It's like, oh hell yeah, there is. There, that's part of probably the hardest part about the whole thing is you invest your life into play and into some of these forms of attention. You invest yourself into the opposite of that shadow attention as well, and you're frameworks to necessarily navigate all that. If you devote yourself so fully into it, I would say the frameworks aren't easily accessible. The scaffolding of how do you take on maybe some of these darker energies or these powerful energies that come with that journey of diving into the play. Because what you mean when you say play is human nature, human instinct, and with that comes that opposite of the good and the glory. So yeah, if you have anything to say to that.
Yeah, yeah. I really love this conversation, Joe. I think it's cool, and I really would like to hear everybody's comments. That has been watching this live. Folk that will watch this recording in the future. Please write down your takeaways from this video. Um, what thoughts it's provoked for you. What questions you have, either for myself or for Joe. Pop them down in the comments in this video, and yeah, let's think about this conversation a little bit more. I'm sure there are people that resonate a lot with what we're saying. Some people it might be completely new. Some people be like, oh yeah, that's how he does his shit. That's how he gets there. But how do I get to my flow? People like that. Relax. For me, the very first thing to be able to get into flow state is to drop it all. Drop it. Don't come at it like this. Drop it, sort of like coming through the back door somehow, or the side door, not the front door, right? Sort of
Well,
like,
I think that in learning more about just you and your path, it seems like adventuring and exploring in the world, traveling really impacted you and impacted how you see these states and the flow. And I think that's a big part of when you say like you just said like how, he gets into this flow and he says it's about story, but how do you find that story? I think it's we gotta actually go and find the story. You got to go out there and you got to put yourself out there and let that story, and you got to actually put trust and faith into this thing I keep saying, that story, that it's real and that it actually has some type of reality to it. I feel like if you don't go through those experiences, you don't really unlock parts of yourself to be more open to what this thing is in you, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Travel, definitely. I
Well,
stay,
open
huh?
travel, I think open travel is a
Open
big part
travel,
of it. Like
yes, yeah, yeah, of course.
you got to
It
open you got to, yeah,
doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be a long time, but it has to be not knowing. And that's why traveling
yes,
is scary. It's scary as well. It's like,
totally.
what's gonna happen? No, no. I've a program that will come out. I don't know exactly when this will come out. It's taken me a long time. Really around helping, yeah, mainly men. I would say midlife crisis, go off, take off. It's like when things aren't working. you just got to take off. You've got to take off, get out of that environment, even if it's for 3 weeks, let's say. But you've got to get out of there, and then you'll have new feedback from different people around you that aren't tying you down with an identity. That if we're in the same context, we're in like a negative feedback loop where the people around us are essentially mirroring back to us all the time. It's very hard to change or evolve out of that state. We need to get out for a little while and come back again.
Well, in my case, that's exactly what I did. I mean, I felt that desire and I felt like I had to leave Alaska and leave that form of identity for those reasons. I just am more of an extremist type of person, as you can imagine. And I did it in a big way where I went full send, like off a cliff. It was just like I didn't plan on coming back and I haven't really gone back. It's been almost 8 years and I haven't returned home just to visit for that reason that you're bringing up is it's one of the hardest things of our culture. That's what I was kind of saying about the habits earlier is I feel as though we all hold each other in certain perspectives of each other. And th- that's where so much of our limitations and our feelings of feeling weighed down and stuck can come from. And I think that I agree with you about how you have to get out and you have to ask yourself in the universe, who really am I or what really am I? What is this experience? And you have to get into the spaces where new reflections can occur. The only thing I'd add to that is that, it's not all green. The grass isn't always green on the other side. There is a whole list of challenges that come with unlocking certain parts of that reality. And there's a balance that I'm trying to figure out and that I'm studying and trying to learn how the scaffolding goes to understand that in the mind. But it's something that I feel very called to, Anthony, is kind of doing something like I hear you doing, where you're doing retreats and you're kind of providing an experience, it sounds like, to really allow people to experience a part of themselves. And that's what I've
Oh,
found the
absolutely.
universe is kind of, what were you going to say?
No, absolutely. And there's always sharing, always a lot of sharing going on. People talk about how their day was, no judgment, and you just get this understanding going on. Very, really important. Um,
Yeah, I find myself being drawn to that very much. So where I want to just kind of learn enough and go through life enough where later I can provide maybe some type of program that provides that experience and really is just focused on this thing we keep talking about with story and narrative and play. That's kind of where I feel like I'm headed in the long
yeah,
form.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
exciting to talk to you because it sounds like that's one of your goals as well. So
yeah. Since I read the Zen of Juggling, I do like a week at the end of September, and I'll be doing it again this year at the end of September in Italy. It's in like an old barn. It's not in the mountains where you are, but it's quite high up. I mean, it's not 2,000 meters or whatever you are. It's like 600 meters or something. But I had this thing that I want to do this 3 week Zen of juggling retreat. But let's see, who has 3 weeks on their hands? That's the
yes,
tricky.
it
That's the tricky one.
is. I almost
So
feel like what were you gonna say?
no, I'm just gonna talk about my book a second, and then we'll close with you with Joe. So Pearls of Juggling. This is my book. 10 years old this year, and we're celebrating with these interviews, and um, yeah, what the hell was I going to say? So anyway, if you're interested in a copy, you can download a free copy PDF of Pearls of Juggling.
Oh, nice.
Here, AnthonyShred.com Jugglers, and yeah, I've been coaching some jugglers, but more. It's not so much about technique; it's more about career. It's about um, understanding what the bigger picture is, what next steps to do, um, without turning into some monster, right? That has to be fully aligned with this playful energy. Otherwise, it's just like career is like you want to be a lawyer, right? No, it's not that. It's not that. It's not like Joe. Get Joe ready to work in Las Vegas. It's not where you're at right now. You know what I mean? It's not. Not. I don't know. That's a whole other conversation to be had, right? But it wouldn't. I don't see. I don't see that. Um, we have Luther. Um, Bangert on in 2 weeks, and yeah, and we worked a little bit together, and he was very clear that he wants to bring more sort of like into um, sort of like art galleries and that kind of thing. So just you have to focus in on that. It's like where, and there are performances in woods. There are site specific things. So it's like there's a whole world around that. It's just finding it. Um, Putting some time into it, but I'm sure that will all shift totally for you. So
Well, we'll see how it goes. In my personal journey right now, I can see many outlets, but one of them that I don't know if I'm going to do or not, but is working more with the ski resorts and doing lift line entertainment. The resorts are essentially a place where you're getting hundreds, if not thousands, of people conglomerating and skiing together. And I work crowds. I end up working crowds at the base of the mountain, in the parking lot, at the top of the mountain. While I'm skiing on the mountain, I do stuff where I throw the clubs over them, and I think there's a lot to be had with that, creating relations around that with the resorts. It's a very new thing and it's very unique. So
yes,
I have to go about establishing the um, professional avenues for that to be like all legit. And I've just been in the building stage of really discovering it and being able to talk about it and be able to pitch it. So that's one avenue I see. There's other ones too, like with the highlining. There's a lot of slackliners around the world, especially in Europe, that are slacklining at more events and in the cities and stringing up lines across skyscrapers. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities to be had with putting high lines up in shows and at events. Again, that's an organizing that I haven't invested in yet because I've been in so much of the building phase and the building of skill and really grinding it out. And I find myself starting to open in that way and maybe start to pursue some of those things.
cool, brilliant. So again, you have any questions? Put them in the comments, please. So next week we have Ben Richter, who I saw him in the BJC in 2000 when Anthony Gatto was on stage, and he brought this incredible character out there. Um, he has combined physical theatre and dance with juggling in a very beautiful way. And he works a lot with choreography. And then we have Luther, who's working a lot with art and a lot of collaborations. And then we have Torsten, who's a juggler, very poetic, theatrical juggler who lives in Portugal. Um, and then we're going to end with Tim Airwalker, who's been doing. I'm just really enjoying his sharing of the process of how he creates with juggling, and
Totally.
really like his mindset behind it, and really interested in what he has to say about that. So, Joe, I'll give you the word for to round up this episode. Like a wish, your wish for everyone that's watching this today.
Oh man, a wish to everyone that's watching, huh? Um, yeah, I wish everybody the best at getting into their state of play, what we were talking about. I hope that there were some little pearls that they gathered from our conversation, and I'm stoked that people are, stoked about my form of the juggle, my story in the juggle. Thank you for having me, Anthony. It was great talking to you, and I'm stoked that we just began our conversation because I feel like it was just a beginning. I feel like we could sit here for a few hours, bro.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, I'm gonna end the stream now. So thank you everybody for watching, and catch you next week.